I always have a lot of fun with Dinesh D'Souza's debates because he's so hilariously derpy but clearly thinks he's brilliant.
We're living in a very unusual time in which atheism has emerged as a kind of militant phenomenon. And in the face of that, that's a little bit odd. Because if you are an unbeliever, why be militant?
You tell me, you don't believe in liberalism or Islam, but you're pretty militant in your opposition to these things. Opposing an ideology does not imply belief in the tenets of that ideology.
I don't believe in unicorns, but I haven't written any books on the subject. I don't spend a lot of time denouncing unicorns. I live my life as if unicorns did not exist.
If you're a Christian, you should believe in unicorns because they're mentioned in the Bible. Answers in Genesis says the biblical unicorn was a real animal, not an imaginary creature, and the absence of a unicorn in the modern world should not cause us to doubt its past existence. If it weren't for creationists, I wouldn't talk about unicorns either. I feel compelled to because they want kids in public schools to be taught in science class that unicorns and dragons actually existed. The reason atheists talk about religions we don't believe in is because apologists and proselytizers so desperately want us to believe in them. And even if we don't, they want us to obey their rules. Is it really so mysterious why we would protest that?
But what we have from the atheist side is a belligerent attack on theism and specifically on Christianity.
What we see is people defending themselves against theocracy.
In reading through the various atheist books by Hitchens, Dawkins, Harris, and the others, if I were to make a list of the values that the atheists cherish the most, I would list values like the idea of individual dissent, the notion of personal dignity, the idea of equality, the equal dignity of men and women, an antipathy to oppression, inequality, and slavery, the idea of compassion as a social virtue. Now, what's interesting is that if you take a good look at this list, you realize that these values came into the world because of Christianity.
Bullshit. Buddha talked about compassion as a virtue before Christ was ever born. Slavery is not something the Bible condemns at all. In fact, it instructs slaves to obey their masters. Opposition to slavery is something that is read into the Bible, not something inferred from it.
How do we know that? Partly by looking outside of Western civilization, where we see that these things that we take for granted, there's a tsunami that devastates a place in Africa, all the Western, which is to say Christian nations, rush to help, nobody else seems to. Something unique is going on that's internal to our civilization.
It may be the case that there are more charities and humanitarian NGOs based in Western countries than non-Western countries, but it's quite an exaggeration to say that this is something nobody else seems to do. You don't have to look too hard to find humanitarian organizations based in the wealthier non-Western countries like Japan, Korea, or Taiwan. This is not something unique to Christendom.
And I want to turn for a moment to science, because one of the rallying cries of modern atheism is the supposed incompatibility between Christianity and science, an incompatibility rendered puzzling at the outset because if you make a list of the leading scientists of the West in the past 500 years, you find that the vast majority of them were not only theist, but specifically and devoutly Christian.
Well, of course, if you specify the scientists of the West over the last 500 years, most of them are Christian. That doesn't mean shit. Lists of the leading Western figures in most fields of human endeavor over the last 500 years are going to be mostly Christian. That isn't evidence that those fields owe any debt to Christianity.
This was true of Galileo, Copernicus, Kepler, Bry, Priestley, Lavoisier. You can just go down the list all the way through Gassendi, Mersenne, Mendel. Some of these guys were monks, like Mendel. Gassendi and Mersenne were priests. So right away you have a puzzle. We have literary theorist Christopher Hitchens and biology major Sam Harris positing a supposed conflict that was not evident to the great scientists of the West, stretching from Kepler to Newton.
There's a lot of shit that wasn't evident to scientists from Kepler to Newton. I don't know if D'Souza realizes this, but scientists have learned a thing or two in the nearly 300 years since Newton died.
I want to make perhaps a further point about this, though. Not only were these scientists Christian, Not only did they see their work as revealing the divine handiwork in the universe, but I want to argue that modern science itself is based on three Christian assumptions that are at root metaphysical. Assumption number one, the universe as a whole is rational. The universe embodies rationality. Now, if you think about it, that's odd. It's pretty easy to say that my friend Bill is rational, or Christopher Hitchens is partially rational. It's another thing to say that matter and objects and planets embody a certain kind of rationality. They follow rational principles.
Why is that odd? What the fuck would it even mean for the universe to not follow rational principles? Saying that material things are consistent with rational principles is simply to say that we don't see material things both existing and not existing at the same time and in the same way. To say that it's odd for matter to behave rationally is to imply that it would be more intuitive for matter to behave in a nonsensical way. How the fuck could anyone see that as more intuitive?
Number two, the universe obeys laws that are comprehensible in the language of mathematics. Again, if you think about it, that's very strange.
No, the universe doesn't obey laws. The universe has apparent regularities that we can describe mathematically. Physical laws are descriptive. They are not rules that the universe observes or to which it submits itself. To believe that this is evidence of design, one has to assume that the default state of existence is randomness and chaos, and that order is only possible if it is imposed by some kind of conscious entity. There is no reason to assume this.
If I'm driving my car, I can follow laws. I see a stop sign, I come to a halt. How does matter obey laws? How does the electron know what to do?
It doesn't, you utter shithead. You think like a fucking child. Predictable behavior is not evidence of intelligence.
If we look at matter, it is unbelievably well behaved. It follows the laws of Newton's inverse square law. It obeys Einstein's laws. The point I'm trying to get at here is that this is a metaphysical proposition. A third one, the laws out there in nature are mirrored by the goings-on within our minds. We can apprehend and understand the laws. Very odd. Why should the goings-on within our head match the goings-on in the universe?
Since our brains are made out of matter, why would it be a surprise that it operates the way other material things operate?